All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Loves Languages. A lot of you guys have seen me at the reference desk or the circulation desk at Paoli Library or Tredyffrin Public Library, but today we are going to do some fun English language acquisition, and we are going to talk about active and passive voice. So in some of these classes before, we had discussed different verb tenses used all throughout English. And what we're going to do today, we are going to examine the different types of speech that's used in either written language or verbal language. So let's take a gander at our tense column that we have. And in these tenses, we have in the green print, present simple, present continuous, past simple, past continuous, present perfect, past perfect, future simple, future be going to, modal, and modal perfect. What we need to make sure that we are understanding here are the sound differences, the phoneme differences in active and passive voice. So that's going to come up in our tenses. Let's take a gander at our active voice, which is more preferred than the passive voice. I'm sure that you guys can hear some of that cat meowing. It's not Oliver this time, that is Coco, and she's just super passionate about active and passive voice. So you might hear her a lot during this video. All right, so let's take a gander at the active voice column. And what we have over here, we have in this first sentence, I make a cake. Now let's break this sentence down. First, I, that is the subject. Two, we have make, that is the verb. And then three, we have cake, that is the object. Subject and object are going to be very important as we get into some of these more difficult tenses, along with the verb and the tense. But just let's get back to what we were doing and not get too ahead of ourselves now. All right, so we broke down that first sentence in active voice. Let's now break it down in passive voice, and let's see if anybody can understand or hear the difference that's in passive voice versus active voice. A cake is made. In this sentence, cake is still the object that becomes the subject. And then you have is made. You have a helping verb along with an action verb. It's also in present simple because is being used as the present verb as opposed to active voice when make is that verb that's used in the present tense. One thing that we don't have in our that we have in our active voice that we don't have in our passive voice is a human subject. All right, so as we continue down these examples, I want to see if there are any differences in the tenses from active voice to passive voice that isn't just about the subject and the object. So let's go down to the next row, which goes across, and let's go down and see in present continuous, I'm making a cake. I, the subject, making, the verb, and cake is the object. Still the same as the top, but we have it being continuous because making, that ing, is telling you that it could be happening as you are actually speaking. And that's what's probably happening. It's not just, oh, I have the cake made, it's right here. No, they're actively making that cake. Then you go into the passive voice for the sentence. A cake is being made. It's still present continuous, but we don't know who the cake is being made by. And that's going to be the same pattern that we find as we continue to go throughout these columns. Okay, so then let's look at the past simple. I made a cake. Keeping in mind it's now past, so make becomes made. And then we have the I, we have the verb, we have the object cake, okay? Then let's look at the passive voice. We have a cake was made. All right, so a cake, which is our object subject, then we have was made, which helping verb and past participle of make creates the past simple. All right, so looking at these different examples in these columns, I want you guys to take a brief second and pause this video, and then I want you to look at each of these different tenses and see if there is any type of a difference that's more than just the object and the subject being flipped around or not even put into the sentence for passive voice. All right, take 30 seconds. Go ahead. All right, I hope you guys found some really cool things. We will go over what you found in the next class, which is going to be on Friday at 1:30 on Zoom. And you'll get to see my beautiful face actually teaching. Okay, let's continue on. So we have some more passive voice examples and some more active voice examples because this is not something that's easy. The trick and tip that I'm going to teach you makes it a bit more simple than it actually is. So let's see if we can do this. The company was sold for $5 million. Now, this leads you to a question. And remember, we talked about those 5 W's. You have a who, what, when, where, and why, sometimes how. That's not a W, it just gets added in. So, who, what, when, where, why. The company was sold for $5 million. Who is the company? Is it just a random company? Is it Apple? That's not a very impressive amount for Apple. So we don't know who. We don't have a subject. That's why it is passive. It leaves you with the question who. If you go over to our active voice examples, the owners sold the company for $5 million. The owners are the who. All right, we have the who, the what, the company. When, we don't have, but I'm guessing it was sometime recently. Why, I'm guessing for $5 million. That's what you would sell the company for. All right, now let's go into our next example. That novel was written by Jack Smith in 1912. And I know what you're thinking. We have a who. It's Jack Smith. However, it's the placement of where you have the subject. If the subject is after the object, it's going to be passive. So the novel is the object and comes in before the author, the subject. So Coco's super into this active passive voice. She loves it. So then in our active voice, we have Jack Smith wrote the novel in 1912. Jack Smith is the subject and he comes before the novel, the object. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. Then in our next example, my house was built in 1988. I know what a lot of people are thinking. Oh, it's mine. It's my house. So subject, my. No, 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 no. My is not a subject. All right. So we have house, my house. We don't know who. Whose does the house belong to? Or who even built the house? All right. So we go into active voice and we have a construction company built my house in 1988. All right. A construction company is the subject in that sense. All right. So let's see what we have going on next. And here we go. I know it looks like there's a lot of text, but I highlighted the most important parts. All righty. So the passive voice is used to place focus on the object rather than the subject. We've gone over this, and it's really easy to put more focus on an object than a subject in your conversations or even when you are writing. Coco just got a call because she's super into this whole passive and active voice. She wants to tell everyone about it, right, Co? She's quiet now. All right. So, in other words, who does something is less important in the passive voice rather than what was done to something. All right. And generally speaking, the passive voice is used less frequently than the active voice. That's somewhat true because we get taught in United States schools at a very young age that you do not want to use the passive voice. It is not as academic, smart, or intellectual as active voice. All right. An active voice is much more concise and short and to the point. So let's look at some of these examples. In our active voice example for our first line, we have produced over 20 different models in the last 2 years. That is the subject. We have produced, and then we have produced being our past verb, over 20 different models in the past 2 years. 20 different models being the goodness gracious, being the object. Sorry guys, had a little bit of a brain fart there. All right, let's look at that example in the passive. Over 20 different models have been produced in the past 2 years. Who have they been produced by? Right? We're focused on the model as opposed to who's producing the model. Okay? And then you can take a look at your on your own at the next two examples. And let's take a little skedaddle onto that next slide. All right, passive voice sentence structure. So when you have a passive subject, object, plus to be, plus the past participle, you guys know how much I enjoy making these into formulas, that's going to be a telltale sign that you have a passive voice. And we need to know that that verb be is conjugated by the participle of the main verb. So remember all of our be verbs: am, are, be, been, being, can, could, did, do, does, has, have, had, is, may, might, must, shall, should, was, were, will, would. All right. A lot of you have heard that song before, and it's one of my favorite ones I learned in 8th grade, and it's still up there. All right. So let's take a gander at the first example. The house was built in 1989. The house is the passive subject because it's an object. Was is a be verb. And then the past participle, built. Okay? So you could also, in the next example, just have the to be verb as be, but it does have to correlate or go with the past participle that is used in the sentence. So my friend is being interviewed today. Who is the friend? Who are you that you're related to the friend? Lots of who, what, when, where, whys have to be asked in these um, questions and for these sentences. Okay, so let's get out along to the next slide. Okay, and using the agent, okay? The person or people talking in action are referred to as the agent. If the agent, the person or people performing in an action, is not important for understanding, the agent can be left out, and that is when you are using the past. So, the dogs have already been fed. It's not important who fed the dogs. The children will be taught basic math. It's clear that a teacher will teach the children basic math. The report will be finished by the end of next week. It is not important who completes the form or the report. In some cases, it's important to know who the agent is, and in this case, use the preposition by to express the agent following the passive structure. So let's take a look down here. The Flight to New Brunswick was written in 1987 by Tim Wilson. Now, if we wanted to make this active, we would say Tim Wilson wrote The Flight to New Brunswick in 1987. Okay, but in this case, we don't need the agent because we want to make it passive. And say that you want to add the agent in, you use the preposition by. All right. We're not going to go over that. And this is what our last thing is going to be for today. We are going to do a passive voice quiz, and we're going to go over all of these answers for our next class on Friday at 1:30 on Zoom. So what I want you guys to do is pause the clip, take, let's see, maybe a minute and 30 seconds, and go over and do the correct answers for making and conjugating the verbs into passive voice. All right, I'm gonna give you guys a minute and 30 seconds because we are going to go over it on Friday. All right, so I hope that everybody had a fabulous time learning about active and passive voice. We will be doing more of this type of fun English acquisition on Friday at 1:30 on Zoom, and I look forward to seeing everyone there. Have a good one, and remember, happy reading!